This is IBM Museum. I've just fired on the 25SX behind me, and it's got to been a few weeks back. I had a little bit of teaser for the where I left the video when I had the system powered up and it went to a particular prompt. And we'll see that in a moment. But I wanted to go through and have the system go through a little bit of the boot up as a lead in. I just didn't want to resume where that prompt was before. Just to kind of show this is the system that has the external video out of the 25SX, known as the K model, and so I'm able to do a video capture more easily. And I wanted to show as well that I'm doing the things like that VESA driver. And so we've gone through and we've upped the RAM on the system. And otherwise, the system is, the software here is as I received it. I haven't made any adjustments to it. And we're going to go through it, and it might even introduce more questions than it answers. Or there may be a particular segment if you see an aspect that I don't cover. I have to see how comprehensive I'm going to be during this process of how this user interface is. And even though I have the screen actually display in 3 places in this instance, and I had to revert to an older video capture just because that HDMI capture that I've been using recently, you've seen where it clips off that right side. And this method it's an older sort of interface, and in some cases it's not as you'll see video extraneous pieces or artifacts, video artifacts is what I want to say sometimes to the video, or things like that. But it does a little bit more better total screen capture, which is necessary in this case. And it does just clip a little bit off that right-hand edge, but it's enough to show the way that we want it to go. And even though that third display comes around to the to where I'm actually recording, making the recording, I'm going to actually flip around and go through and just look at the larger screen that I have connected up, just to be able to see it a little bit better. So I'll actually take the picture of me off the corner, and I don't think I'm going to adjust any of the video capture screen otherwise. But let's go through and do that. And of course, you'll be hearing my voice. We'll be going through, and I just don't know how long a video this is going to be. Okay, I've got my chair flipped around, got my glasses in case I need them. And you see the system, it reports the time and date. And I would have to look at the Autoexec.bat just to kind of see if it's I mean, it would have something because we're going through and we're running that batch file process for some of the display, but maybe they don't have the echo off or some other command for it to go through and prompt for time and date, or has that set manually otherwise for some reason. And as I say, this software is exactly as I received it. We've got the PC-DOS version, again, 5 on this system. And this tantalizing prompt here, ready to load NewDeal software. Press any key to continue. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is the NewDeal SchoolSuite Release 3. And from information I found online, there's just a little bit, and I don't really I haven't found any YouTube videos on this as well in my searches. And you're going to see the screen paints and everything the same way that I do here, the same experiences. I don't know why it goes through in kind of that double paint of loading, but it gets us into the system, and there is possible adjustments that I could make on the system since I increased the RAM. As we'll see, there may be some page file settings and the video as well, and we'll touch on those as we get to them. But on the screen, and I think it probably does a pretty good screen capture here, we do have the computer icon on what would be the desktop here, the document icon, and a world icon. We've got this NASA astronaut is doing a spacewalk, and courtesy NASA listed there in the bottom corner. And then we have, just like the Apple OSs of old, and I don't know how new, I'm not really as familiar with those, but we've got the wastebasket, very similar to the recycle bin of Windows 95 and onward, of course. And then we've got this taskbar at the bottom, and I don't know if there's a personalization for it, and then it also showing the time and having a very similar aspect to Windows for bringing up a dialogue and saying the time and date. And it's got a separate kind of control panel interface as well. And then we've got our equivalent button that's not really necessarily a start, but that button in the same corner. And it's the interesting thing is here. Now this did come out, and I'll have a link with all the history as it goes through, and basically the companies that were tried to market this, and but this was released in March of 1999 for this particular version. And it's I mean, there's a lot of predecessor, a lot of history before it, and a little bit of history afterwards, and ups and downs as it went through. But this version here, and I have yet to try it as well, was supposedly the first user interface aspect of it to be able to run a specific network card for the for connecting this into a network and having the ability to get it online at wherever level. And that just looks like that initial level, and there's not much to it. And I'll probably go through it a later period of time and attempt that. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to clone the software on the drive, because I don't want to mess up the original. I want to experiment around with it where I'm not going to break it, make it so I can't go through, and not being familiar enough with how it runs. But let's go through, and I'll get down to the kind of the start button in a moment. I did want to go through the icons on the desktop first. Now this is a Model 25SX, and it just has that one drive in this case, the one diskette drive, and that is that happy circumstance of that I accidentally installed a 2.88 megabyte drive on it. Maybe sometime I'll get up to that capacity of diskette and kind of run through that, and but for all intents and purposes, it's just like a doubling of the 1.44 megabyte diskette drives that were very common. And of course, you have to scale up and get a better quality diskette, and has a special type of recording that it does on that, is how it fits all that stuff in there. So I don't know if it's here. It's treating the drive B probably as a copy of the drive A, that you, if you're in a copy diskettes or whatever, it prompts for you to put a diskette in for the drive A and then request they eject it and put in that diskette for drive B. I think it mirrors it a lot like the DOS level can do when you just had that single diskette drive as well. And then it has the and being the 25SX, it's got that ID drive. And then, you know, I've gone through, and at a later point I'll show, and I did have on where I opened up the Model 25s and things like that, and we saw that little it had an orange label on the top of it, and that card that has that ROM BIOS extension that makes it so you can put larger a larger hard drive on the system, that those LBA, long block addressing. And I haven't modified the file. I did go through and I did put the undocumented PC because I was interested in kind of running some of those on there. The starter is the same thing. I went through and I created a folder of so it has the ability to create its own starter diskette from there as well. And then the SVGA VESA directory for that video driver, and that's also very particular to the 25SX, and I will undoubtedly cover that aspect in later videos as well, and how what's been figured out about that chipset that's on there, and that's on a few different PS2s and one microchannel adapter, and we'll go through and investigate that. And the Model 25SX actually has the video RAM, the 512 kilobytes of video RAM, and so it's able to do the displays, or it has that video RAM memory to be able to do higher color depths, and in normal circumstances higher screen resolutions. But you have to remember, the Model 25 is that little screen, and we don't want to overdrive the display. Try to have that old CRT do a resolution higher than what it needs to do, and so thus it's mainly where you get what's considered more color depth, and we'll get into that aspect here as I go through things as well. I think these other directories, it's not really. Oh, I've had a guest bring me cookies, and so the things on the hard drive are some pretty basic things that were there before. We've got SID on there. I can't remember if I went through, and this is the system that I did SID from on the Model 25SX. Probably so. And I don't know if that ET, and that's an Evergreen technology, and that's kind of like a CPU tester or to be able to know the baseline CPU speed and things to the CPU as well. Like when you install an updated CPU, then you run that to see how much faster your system is than before. So not really much on, necessarily on the hard drive area that we can go through. And this is a user interface. I mean, it runs on top of the DOS operating system on the system. And you can see, I mean, it's got a very Windows-like sorts of screens. I mean, even a help. Here we can get the info and attributes of particular. And all from that file menu of the copy, move, rename, throw away. Whether you're selecting all or sorting the things in that window, viewing, creating a new folder, and closing it. And let's see what the... And we'll probably go into this, some of the help areas. And this looks like the help system like it was on with Windows 3.0, 3.1, where it's hypertext driven. And all that means, and that was the way that they used to do web pages as well, that you could go through and design that HTML document basically to have links in it that you could click on and things like that. And then they had different attributes there for different font sizes and very... you could still have a little bit of formatting to how you showed the information with different font sizes and things like that. In addition to kind of the links and the ability. So that was the system that Microsoft used at that point in time, and seemed to work well enough for them. And just like the kind of that web page interface, you have the ability to go back and see the history of what you've done and the contents of going through and what that help file is. We're just going to exit help. We do get to the Windows-like, minimize and maximize buttons as well, and then the X close. And so this stuff here just being very, very close to the Windows operating system or earlier user interface as it was, because the same thing for that. Windows 3.x ran on top of DOS, and even took a while for Microsoft to get away from having to have an underlying US to their an underlying OS to their user interface. So we're going to go through and we'll close out of that window. I'm not wanting to get too involved to get, to make this a very long video. I want to touch on the basics, and I want to have it open in the comments so that if we see kind of an interesting area to, for somebody to comment and request, hey, can we go back and take a little bit more of a look at that, more detailed, or maybe even they have experience with this user interface more than I do. And so the preferences, and this is very similar to like that Windows 3.0, 3.1, where they had the control panel, or the My Computer Windows 95 aspect, I guess, with where they had that control panel in there with the drives that were on the system and things like that. So, and the same, and we have some sort of push pin that we can apparently pin that on the top as a top window or something of that nature. And then they've gone through very similar to maybe some of the, I'm trying to remember what would be a good example, but they've got that help button now up there close to minimize and maximize and close as well. So, and it looks like the standard key sequences that they went through for exit, it's F3. Okay, so we're going to look at the background and do background from the list below. We have the ability to do a background color, and very similar things as the alignment that you can have in Windows, to where you tile it. the background image, place it in the center, or justify it in some way to the upper left of the screen. And of course, I would have to see for the color depth. We'll get into that on the display. But this, I would suppose the Astro 16 is probably 16 colors. Astro 256 is 256 colors. And they've got various things. Probably some repeating designs like the Windows had with bricks, cubes. Some of these might be even interesting to see later on in a follow-up video where I can address a little bit more of the individual items of this and saying, now we're going to go through and look at the SchoolSuite 3 backgrounds. And at least they're starting to identify, hey, it's 16 color, turn 56 color. And there's some of the backgrounds there. I don't know why, if this is NewDeal SchoolSuite Release 3, I don't know why it has this 4 and 8, and that may be, I wouldn't think that'd be color depths. That didn't look like it's a version. That maybe looks on how many on, I don't know. We'll look at that, I think, in a later video. I don't want to dip too deep in some of these. I realize that I sit here and I talk a lot. Pipes, that's a background, not necessarily as a screensaver. But yeah, we'll look at those later on, and just tell me if you're interested in looking at some of the aspects there. So we've closed out that window. Let's look at the computer. Okay. Extra memory type. To make use of additional memory, like we added that 8 megabyte SIM. And change interrupt levels if your computer has unusual port configurations. And I would even really need to see on that is, do you need to also change the underlying DOS, or how does that work with that operating system truly being underneath things? And we're XMS high mem sys, and we did have high mem sys that was loaded. Extended, and that might even help us. And as I say, this is on a 25SX, which is, able to have above that 1 megabyte like a original Model 25 would have. And then there's the 256 that was also able to see up to 16 megabyte of extended memory. And I don't have any expanded memory or no memory manager on here for going to the expanded standard, but that might be handy to see on some other systems. And as I say, with us adding the 8 megabyte SIM, and I don't know why it has that question mark necessarily by it as well, of being IRQ4, COM3. And I wonder if it maybe flags that if it has a conflict, or see, because and that was the normal IRQ line for COM1 was 4. And then that was old school, where when you had to do the IRQ settings for when you had like a serial mouse on your computer, and a external or even internal modem that was on a COM port as well, and how you had those interrupt lines set up because you didn't want moving your mouse to cause a disconnect or affect the to be necessarily a higher priority than that modem was doing, that dial-up modem. Now for the parallel ports, it's got a dot next to letting the BIOS handle that aspect, how it's set up in BIOS as defaults, and then you have a option button is what they consider it, exclusively one setting for those. You can let DOS handle it, or you can set to IRQ 5 or 7, I guess, depending on the system. So there may be places that we get in there and readdress these memory aspects with the machine I'm running it on now. And I'll have to see, now that I went through and pulled that question mark off of 4, once you click on OK, and it didn't act like that confused the system too much here to say, hey, you selected something I wasn't sure about. Or okay, so we have the ability to modify the user interface here, and no doubt we can investigate a lot of that later on. And then the user interface colors, and it looks like we have that blue, so a lot like the default Windows user interface, but we can change those around. I don't think it's necessarily any themes that you can set the glaring hot dog stand colors or something like that with a theme, but interesting nonetheless. And it looks like for the buttons, of course, if you don't have any changes, you don't have the ability to go through and do the OK. Reset probably goes back to default settings. And we have our cancel is the exit out of here. And of course, we always have the help, context sensitive help available here that could tell us a little bit more about those settings, no doubt, as well. Configure UI. Applications. Express menu. Bypass new. Open file dialogues. Okay, launch model, single instance, prompt user, launch level. And I don't know enough about these, but you know that with that help menu, there could be a lot of video possibilities here to go in and just have a video and address one little thing and look at the help file and try and figure out this a little bit deeper. And these look like they're have the appearance of buttons because there's not really a line divider, but these are kind of treated, I guess, as tabs effectively here. And we have the ability to use small icons. Running DOS applications. Some of this is grayed out. Okay, interface. And this is my first look at a lot of this stuff too. I went through a little bit of the basics and and just when I got it just to kind of see, but I didn't jump in there in depth or really take a look at too much. Start applications maximized. Now the aside, and again, I'm just going to get talking here. One of the things I did in the Windows 3.0, Windows 3.1 time frame is I created an application in Visual Basic for Windows. I think probably Visual Basic 2. And that was really nice that you could create a easy Windows program using the basic language, and of course slow. That was going through and not really necessarily optimized, but for knocking out little basic programs. And my program was windowless, and it was called Maximize, and all that was the applications within Windows that, like Write and Notepad and Paint, when you went through to launch those, in a lot of time, I mean, it didn't launch them maximized. And I wanted to go through and I wanted to make it so the basic applications that were there, and even possibly something else. And I showed basically how for someone to go through and to also other programs other than just the utilities in Windows, of how to set that. And that, basically, I just took advantage of the Windows API, application program interface, that said, if you've got where you run my Maximus program and that where program followed it, when that program was launched, it would be launched into maximized screen. And I'll have to find where I looked around for that years ago, and I'll have to see if I've got it on a system somewhere and pull it back out. And I mean, it was a very quick and easy program to do. I didn't really see too much out there that was of that nature, whether that was necessarily an issue that other people experienced. But I went through and it worked for me. I didn't really develop it, throw it out there on the, there wasn't any internet or anything else at that time, but just to pass it around. But so we have just whether we get noises, whether we can even remove minimize and maximize buttons in that screen, pinnable menus, turn off keyboard accelerators, hide help buttons, all these settings here, scroll rate, scroll bar size, and just some of the things there. Even execute on startup. We're getting into just like that startup folder with the Windows 3.x and the startup of Windows 95, what that introduced. And enable help editor. File manager. Connect to remote, show links in blue. Word wrap file name. File names, DOS launchers. Disable B drive. So that's probably that aspect of, I'm going to double click on, just like in Windows, double click on that. No? Since I don't have any size buttons there. That's just interesting for the configure UI that it kind of was clipping that left-hand edge. Even I try and move it around from there and it doesn't. But that disable B drive, that probably goes through and removes the DOS aspect. If you just have a single diskette drive, to be able to swap diskettes, and it treats each diskette goes in, whether it's considered the A drive or the B drive, effectively. And overlapping folders and things like that. It's got the OK button, although I don't know that I necessarily changed any of these settings. But we'll go through and just cancel out of that. Down to the next row. Okay, this computer can offer drives over its serial line. That might be a feature that we have to really kind of check out and find what's all to that. But this is selecting which drives you're offering over that serial line. And it acts like you have checkboxes there, so it's not mutually exclusive drive selections either. You can go through and select all your drives apparently over, and this is the option buttons again, and these are mutually selective. You can only have one of any of those four combinations if you have actually 4 COM ports or something else on the system. Baud rate. And we're set to, probably was relatively over a modem sort of thing at that time frame. Modems would not have been able to handle. Well, it's getting up to where there's probably in 1999 they were getting over and started to get up to where the 56K modems were released. But that upper saying, the 115 to 115,200 is the that would be more like a direct connection. And I'm sorry, it's late. It's math is turned off now. Now, time and date, and this is the one aspect that I do know of, that if you do the same thing where you click in that lower right hand corner, it brings up the same dialog. And for saying, time and dates, and we would even have to see of how far they even go out for years supported and everything else. And we're in the day of infamy, December 7th. Okay, and I'm just going to cancel. I'm not really wanting to change anything. We go to the fax, modem fax class, what COM port it's on, whether it auto answer, advanced, phone line quality. That's unique, I guess. Set fine mode faxes. Wait 30 seconds. And I'm old enough to remember also the application of WinFax and going through and where you had fax software on. And I don't know if I want to sender info. At least all this stuff doesn't look like it's populated by any previous owner as well. But a lot of time for the fax, if you sent faxes, you were supposed to be required that you included the sender information. And as always, we could go through and go into the context sensitive help at some later point to see no cancel button here, just the OK. Have to keep that cough button active here too. Okay. Configure the font list on the toolbar and font menu of your applications. Drag and drop. Okay. Configure font menus for system default. So quite a few different little fonts that we could get into at some point, even to see how some of those look. I mean, those font names don't look like anything I necessarily recognize. Drop font here. And maybe the ability to even create your own fonts. Choose application. Something to go in depth on another day. And we see the screen paints in the background, and That could be helped with better memory or different video drivers as we may get into. International. Okay, and then how it shows dates, currency, numbers, and time. And surprisingly, there's a lot to this. Although I know that the product life they went through, and they were able to really spend some time into this. Internet, and we've got like a PPP username and stuff like that, with its server signed, user signed, and this looks like phone number mainly and modem, what they're talking about for dial-up. Although, as I said, this SchoolView or the SchoolSuite Release 3 was supposed to be the first side of this that had where you could put a specific Ethernet card in, configure it a certain way. These are a lot of the sayings that I was familiar with when I started working for an internet service provider in 1997. And of course, being dial-up at that time and knowing what DNS values and all that to plug in for customers. Even doing a lot of generating the floppy diskette installs for our customers. Even the CD recordables. And I remember a time frame when each one of those CD recordable discs was over $1 each. And we would go through and buy orders in the hundreds of those things at one time. And they actually had a gold foil initially, and that would peel off, basically off the disc. Not intended to peel off in normal circumstances, but you could go in there and you could separate and get that foil out of there. And then, so we've got different keyboard settings. Pressing shift. I mean, a lot of control here. Exchange control and caps lock keys. Some of the people that were familiar with different style older keyboards, I guess is the way to say it. Lights out. Okay. And this lights out is actually relating to the screensaver. And I'm surprised we haven't had that occur on us. I've kept the mouse moving. But and it might be worthwhile to check out some of these with time as well. Even you can have a password protected screensaver. Wow. Fades and wipes. Default screen blanker. And even some of the ones, and I'd have to see if this. Okay, so then you have different options. And this one currently stars, it's a lot, if you remember the Windows 3.x days, the star field. You're in the Star Trek show, you're going through what's displayed as you go and shooting through the stars. And probably has density and things like that. Draw on color, huh? So with Windows, you couldn't get colored stars. And with the SchoolSuite Release 3, at least, you can. Wake up on key presses. What mouse movements? Wake up on mouse button press. Reduce priority when screens saver. That'd be like for a program running in the background in that sense. Disable blanking when mouse is in lower right corner. So that's similar to how Windows is now. When you put that, your mouse bar in that lower right corner, it's showing the desktop in that instance. Consume key presses when I'm blanking. That's like you're pressing a space bar a whole bunch of times. And it understands, yeah, okay, you want to unblank the screen. Look and feel. So different from the UI settings in that case. Font size, small, medium, or large. Editable text, small, medium, large. Overstrike. Document safeguarding. And I had to see on that, of that being an effect of the user interface, that is it only when you have a document open for a certain length of time that it protects it for. Okay, we're configuring a modem, and sure enough, this doesn't have a modem installed in it on this 25SX. I do have older modems around that could work with it. That might be even interesting to do. I don't really have any dial-up access I could do that I'm now. Okay, double-click time. All the mouse settings. Right hand or left hand, and it's correct for the port we have in there, IBM PS2 mouse. Selected ports. And I have actually what they refer to almost like the Microsoft version of what's called the dovebar. That it's an oval IBM mouse that wasn't necessarily with the PS2s. I think that was released a little bit later on. Beige. And in that case, people don't realize that there's beige buttons on the mouse, and then at a later point you have some other mice that have actually a gray buttons on the mouse. And that was actually, they changed the resolution of what the mouse is capable of. So the gray buttons were a higher quality resolution than what it was for those beige buttons before. People just didn't realize the background. So this is what I was talking about, and of course the appropriate warning here. Caution in incorrectly changing any of these options can seriously degrade your computer's performance and possibly even prevent the system from functioning at all. And it's got a swap file and the page file size. And this was set up back when, and there's the installation program that I've seen for this is fairly involved and probably goes through and suggest certain settings for the capabilities of your computer. But this was set up on the system when it had 4 megabyte of RAM memory. So that page file looks to be about half. And that may be something we look at later on in that help context. They may recommend certain things to say, well, if you got so many megabytes, then you can do that. And that is where you'd gain a little bit of the performance. But I'm really leery on adjusting settings until I have this cloned in some regard and actually get it over to another system to where I'm not really worried if I break it because I just restore it. Kind of like almost a virtual system that they have now. Okay. And this was apparently in places that had DeskJet printers too. And I just wanted to look through and wow. version laser. Doesn't have that. I think I had an EPL 8000 laser printer. Almost makes me. So I think I set it out in the weather, or wasn't really concerned about it now. And I went through at the time for my dad's business, and I put on more RAM. It was actually DIP RAM, the dual inline package RAM that I had to put on there. And but it probably still a toner, and if I had a driver for it, I'd connect on a more of an old school printer to this. Quite a few. Even, the LQ is letter quality, early version. Color and black and white. A lot of Epson printers at that time. HP printers. Probably even getting into the LaserJet. Wow. Paint jets. And then IBM. That's the ones I really wanted to look at. The standard 4019, which is the laser printer, the kind of classic laser printer. And then its derivatives, 4029s and 4039s, and graphics printer. Pro printers. Lexmark, and that's relating to the IBM printers, the 4039. Wow. Panasonics. I had a 2123, I think. I think I even had one that was color. Panasonic. Tandy's. Text-only printer. Test printer. Let's see, what is the... Even some of these printers I haven't heard of before. Connected always, or sometimes maybe that's like a switch. Those classic type of device. Printer? Huh. I don't know if the screen draw just takes that long, or if it... I can hear the hard drive going. And selecting plotter kind of just blanks that selection. Camera. Other. And whether if there's the ability to install a particular driver in a particular way. Test. Being able to edit. Well, enough time with that. Sound. Okay. And it looks like just 4 selections. Our scroll is inactive. Sound is on. And of course I do hear a little bit of the beeps and everything else from this as we go through, but kind of interesting that it has a Sound Blaster microchannel. It's one of the selections, and I can't think of the Sound Blaster for microchannel. Was that different I/O ports? Maybe more capable of I/O ports than the PC versions. But it's just interesting. It has that recognition of a microchannel adapter task switch. And we are currently set to no task switcher, but they've got the DR-DOS 6.0 task max and the NewDeal 7.0 task manager. Text. Some more code. Spell checker. And then you have a user dictionary. Wow. Not to see how involved that is as well. Oh, the spell checker. Video. And this is another section, as I said, and that it's currently set to 16 color, and even some of the screen paints to me are kind of painful in a way that takes a little bit of time. That if you go up to higher color depth and higher resolutions, of course, the thought is that it would do worse. The performance would be worse on a particular system if you're able to go up to higher resolutions or higher color depths. But since I have that VESA driver for the... and it's got a lot of drivers as well. And even particular display adapters that you can recognize here. Hercules. IBM MCGA. Wow. Mono. It doesn't have a color option for that. That might be interesting to play around with. I'm thinking of another YouTube channel that I am aware of, to bring this up to him and see if he's... I think he looked through some of the NewDeal software, but I didn't know. I know he got in a lot into the GeoWorks and things like that were later. And as I said, I had a Cirrus Logic compatible EGAs. We saw, I think, the CGA. We'd even have to see on how well some of those would do. And I think 800 by... let's get in some of the VESA. Because we got 1280 by 1024. Some of the pretty good. Okay. And I was mainly interested in the VESA driver I have on here, that it is capable of doing these higher color depths. It's more of a direct driver. Something like this VESA compatible Super VGA 640 by 480, because that's not a different resolution running on the 25SX, but a higher color depth. And I'll have to look to see if that would affect how that would be affecting performance with that, if they've got, because that it's supposed to be a VESA compatible driver that I'm running on here, but it's got the VGA standard of the 16 colors. It's going to be real common for like the PS2 level. And once we can work with the system to looking at that a little bit more. And I am not, we're just through with the computer aspect. Some of these other things, like the document, let's take a look at that. And there's a real good possibility of going through these at some later point too. The README text that's dealing with the installation of the NewDeal software, eStore and all that academic order form, or retail order form pricing, back when the company was viable and you could buy this user interface. And I think it's developed more for along the school lines. And we'll touch on that a little bit later on with the iClass stuff from IBM, the IBM Classroom Administration, IBM Classroom LAN Administration Program, or system for the S. And I think these are just basic clip art. FlexiFace. Silhouettes. And it's kind of interesting how that goes through and draws that kind of like a vectored, of how that would be stored. And even multicolor. Bumblebee. What's the next one? That's taking I guess a different kind of bee. Pages, and be interesting to see how those files are stored. And I think that is for another time, maybe going through some of those school templates. And I think the deal with this is the NewDeal SchoolSuite Release 3, and that's supposed to have, I've been looking at the history, and that was supposed to be, there was a version sold for the Office side, and for someone using at a place of employment, basically, I guess, is a different sort of user interface. But the NewDeal SchoolSuite Release 3 was supposed to be the same thing as the NewDeal Office, only they had these templates, what they said. Covered pages, huh? And that might be something for, and then these new calc, new draw, new file, new write. We'll be getting into those. I looked even crossword puzzles. Huh. That might be geograph. Not geography, geograph. Huh. Wow. And that's really involved at the time. I mean, there's probably some programs out there that back when, but I was really not familiar with anything of a crossword level. I'm sure that there are programs available, but it's really interesting. I'm more of a Sudoku fan than crosswords. Although I could probably hold my own. Let's look at that README. And some of these files might even be worthwhile to post them or to look through them a little bit more. Have others kind of look through and NewDeal SchoolSuite installation help. And saying system requirements. DOS version 3.0, OS 2. 2.0 or Windows 95. So that would even be interesting to have this installed on a system that can capably run Windows 95. And that's a way to go through those. World. Okay. And this, I think, is going to be relatively involved as well. Let me look at the running time so far. And we're over an hour. Okay, that was all. That was 2 desk accessories extra. 3D font demo. Bounce. Screen dumper. Huh. Being able to have that print screen capable of, and stopwatch. And that writes it to a file. Huh. Maybe I should start that at the beginning of the video to know how. Oh, and that's restarting the clock, basically. And then now we get into, instead of just the file menu, having a lot more of the conventional Windows style. The edit and the window. And of course, whether you pin it on top and what it shows. Okay. Huh. It's interesting. Delete it. Bounce. Maybe investigate that a little bit later. New basic sample applications. So they apparently had some sort of basic compiler, maybe. Is this C? I'll have to look at that and see how different that is. Or whether that's like a scripting language, book reader. A book to open. If that has a little... Calculator. Wow. Measurements. That's money. It's like maybe the different formats of area. I don't know what that represents at all. Paper tape, save options. Convert. Huh. Wow. And I don't remember seeing anything like this on the Windows level for some sort of calculator. Huh. Oh, that. I was looking for how to unpin. Oh, okay. That pins the menus up there. Huh. The program menus. I don't know if these are that conversion thing, because that might be a thermometer. Some measurement there. CD player, and we don't have a CD drive on this system. Character map. Okay. And I remember this sort of stuff with the Windows 3.x, I think, had some of these stuff where the character map almost identical to the Windows. Okay, and apparently you can have, as it shows in the upper right hand corner here, a clock. You can put in whatever position, different colored text. And now we have a clock running to see how late it is. And I guess once you start it, it's there. Oh, okay, there it goes away. Our crossword thing again. And I wonder if there's an ability to do your own, design your own crosswords or something like that. Directory lister, the fax stuff. This is like maybe a file manager. Yeah, some sort of file manager. And print, I mean, some ability to print documents or print management maybe. eStore HTML. I think more of the and that's actually the program to send and receive faxes. We saw the setup for that. Fax view, file finder, media viewer. We have this new banner. Let's look at the media viewer. Huh. Okay. New banner. The ability maybe to print. Yeah, the banner printer. I know someone that could be interested in that too. Okay, our new calc, and that's like a spreadsheet. So these would be the equivalents of like the built-in Windows accessories, or even a little bit of the Microsoft Works kind of starting, or Office level. This would be probably like the equivalent of the terminal program in Windows 3.x. Yep. Ability to dial a number, run through scripts, what terminal types. And there's a very comparable to Windows 3.x terminal program. This looks like a Rolodex card or NewDraw would be the equivalent of like the Paint. Okay. And we can look at more options, I guess, to that. Let's start that again, because I thought some of those. Are we able to get at? No, we have to have a document open. And gives us the hourglass that, like we're different, used to with. Huh. And there we set spell checking. And it'll probably prompt us if we want to save that when we, let's call that untitled. Or maybe it knows that we just didn't do anything. We didn't draw anything, so it didn't ask us to save. New file. New manager. Okay, so that's like a file manager of a, in a way too. It creates the folders or. Yeah, because you have maybe like the ability to pull up a DOS prompt or work with the drives. A launcher. And I would even have to see what sort of applications that this could run necessarily. Okay, a new, it's like a day planner. Okay. Okay, new write. And that would be the equivalent of the write program of Windows 3.x. That user level again. And even to see what format that saves those in. Okay, and that might be just the preferences, same preferences that we saw before. Yeah, just another way to access them. We went through those. Scrapbook. And I would have to read up on that as far as what equivalent that is. Now, okay. Skipper SE. Now, this is the web browser of NewDeal. And we have it to where working with that HTML. Might be interesting to see how it would render some of the older HTML like 3 documents. And a new document. So is there I wonder if this would be even a way to go through and design basic HTML pages, or is it just a web browser? And we got the little spinning graphic. Okay, no, it loaded that. So welcome to NewDeal eStore. And this company is now defunct. I mean, it's interesting for some of the histories of these, the developers and the companies that worked with this stuff. And I'll try and link in what I can. But this is going to open up, I think, a little bit of discussion and comments and as I say, a lot of chance of going over things later on. They've got a solitaire program. Very much equivalent to the Windows version. And I don't think you guys just want to sit here and watch me play solitaire. But, wow. Yeah, it's a lot of equivalent of the Windows. Probably have like 3 card draw or 1 card draw. The card backs. And very similar to the Windows solitaire there. Draw how many cards. Level of play. And it does a running clock counter. How long you've been in the game. Text file editor. And that just be like a notepad. Equivalent. So that's gone all through the world. I looked and there was nothing saved in the wastebasket earlier from previous owners. But we have access from that button of the applications, documents. And I wasn't really sure about what these inbox, outbox things did. maybe somebody knows, or and I guess a way to start screensaver. And as I said, this is the star field sort of thing that a lot of like Windows 3.x people will be used to. File Finder. Documents in NewDeal. The help. And going through this help menu, of course, is going to be very helpful. We talk about bitmap format for the new draw. Copy marks and trademarks. So we see GeoWorks there. And that has in GOS. Quicken is a registered trademark, and there may be references that they do to Quicken and Sound Blaster that they had the correct spell. Word for word, Nimbus Q, JPEG filter. Portions of this program are copyright 1997 to 1999 Breadbox Computer Company. And that will be a little bit of the history. They'll try and link in. Launch. Basically like a run. And going through and, as I say, figuring out what sort of applications that could launch. But I think this has just at least an initial view has gone on. And we're coming up on an hour and 30 minutes for the length of this. So I think that that's a good starting overview to the teaser, and leave a comment if we want to look at a particular aspect of that. And I undoubtedly will plan some later videos for getting more in depth in some of the areas, looking at that and understanding a little bit more when I know of it too, to how to make a little bit of adjustments, maybe increase the performance a little bit. The main thing I see is that just those screen draws and everything, and the Model 25SX I have here. I mean, that's a 16 megahertz 386SX, and again 12 megabytes of RAM, which is not super capable, but I mean, you know, the question is, would it run Windows 3.0 or 3.1X just as well, you know, as it does this NewDeal user interface? So we have choices here. I don't know what really shut down the computer besides going back to DOS or a blank screen would do anyway, because the Model 25 has the button you have to switch off. Of course, reboot would go through and just reboot DOS and all that we saw at the start of the video. Exit to DOS is a good place here. So if you like this video, please click on that like button and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't, and pass that along to others that may be interested in this sort of thing. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.